Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Inside the Real Job podcast. I'm your host, Yenfu Chen. Today I chat with David Howell, the skilled surfboard shaper and one of the co-founders and co-owners of Misfit, that globally known surf brand. I want to give a big shout out to David for being my podcast pioneer. This podcast is a journey in the making as I connect with fascinating individuals to explore their life stories, careers, and the secrets to success if you were to follow in their footsteps. Can't wait to keep improving and have another awesome chat with David in the future. Hope you enjoy it. Hey David, good to meet with you today. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Yourself?
Very well, actually. I'm pretty excited to hear your life. I know you've been a surfboard shaper over the last 22 years.
Yep.
And you're also a co-owner and co-founder of Misfit brand. So really want to get into, the life of, what you do every day. So why don't we just start first by telling me or everyone, listeners, how did you get into surfboard shaping?
Well, I started in the early 2000s. I was living in Narrabeen at the time, and I was in a apartment on the beach, and there was a guy that was living in the apartments at the front, and we started having a few beers together and just hanging out for a little while. And he was I knew that he was a surfboard shaper. He actually came over from Western Australia, and his name was Cole Adams, and he was probably about 25 years older than me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And this company had brought him over to shape surfboards for a couple of labels back in those days. So he was mainly brought over to shape lost surfboards in Australia. So at that point in the early 2000s, there wasn't too many shaping CNC machines.
Yep.
So he, after a few drinks one night, we were chatting and kind of told me that there's a lot of work and that he wouldn't mind, like, if there were, if I wouldn't mind helping him, like, or learning to shape.
Okay.
And I as we'd had a few beers and didn't really think too much of it, but that was on the weekend. Then on the Monday afternoon, I just rocked up at his work and then just started watching him.
Right. Okay.
So basically, after watching him for at least 3 months, probably 4 months, without touching anything, no foam, no nothing, I started started slowly sort of getting my hands on the foam.
Yeah.
And then it kind of led from there. It was more watching than doing and asking lots of questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I was learning to actual hand shape, which is pretty uncommon these days.
Right.
Like, there's not too many people that actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's most people design, and this is what I do now. I design my files on the computer, and then a CNC machine cuts them. But back in those days, we used a planer. We had outlines, templates, and just full blanks. And so we used to cut them out and then shape them by hand. And yeah, so that's how I started shaping with Cole.
Yeah, right. And when you say Cole, like, what drawn you to Cole or vice versa? Like, what were you doing before shaping that Cole sort of went, oh, you might have the skills already to do some of this? Or was this just something that it was just through relationship that you've, got together? Or did you have a particular skill that you could transition into surfboard shaping?
Yeah. So before I was shaping, I was a French polisher by trade.
Right.
So I'd done my gone to TAFE, and got my degree there, and I actually finished a bit early in my French polishing course, and I started my own business when I was about 21, I think it was, when I started that. So I've always been good with my hands and with tools, like the tools that you kind of need to shape, but just having a good eye and good with your hands. And like I said, it was kind of, we'd had quite a few drinks that night, so it was quite funny how, it was kind of like an off the cuff sort of question that Cole asked, and not much was really said after it, but I showed up on that Monday.
Yeah, showed your keenness.
Yeah. And then from the time I showed up, that was, like I said, early 2000s. I would do my normal French polishing job, basically from 8 till 4.
Yeah.
And then I would go around to his work in Brookvale from 4 to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd get up super early, and I'd get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning with him, and he'd go in early, because we surfboard shaping, like a lot of factories back in those days, because there was so much work, would run 24 hours a day, would run around the clock. So people would be in at all sorts of hours. So we would get there super early in the morning, and then I'd do quite a few hours early in the morning, then go to my French polishing from, say, around 8 to 4, and then sometimes I'd go again, in the afternoon. So I did that for a handful of years.
Yep.
And then kind of transition from there to full-time.
Yeah, right. And you were talking about you were good with the hands and, with obviously certain tools that you use for French polishing. Did that help a lot? Or do you feel like there's something that, if you could go back time, if you were keen to do it, was it something that you feel like you had to be good with your hands, or was it something that anyone can just pick up and just, experience over time? Or because you've had that trade, it definitely helped you?
Not so much the trade, because I remember the transition from, because, French polishing is predominantly wood, and then going from foam. So something from a very hard, dense surface going to foam.
Yeah.
It was, it took a while to not be so heavy-handed, and to work with the foam, like molding the foam, which was, it did take a while, but because I did have a good eye, and I could use the tools properly, it didn't take as long as, say, someone that just came in there. Like generally in the past, what people would normally do would, start from doing ding repairs to doing fins and kind of working their way up to shaping. So I kind of started the other way around, where I was shaping, but like very much under the watchful eye of Cole, which again that doesn't really happen these days, because the computers and the files are so good these days. You don't have to you can make a surfboard look like a surfboard. Anyone can do that by just going on the computer and designing it. But when you're doing it by hand, to try and make a surf, like even the outline look clean, it's just a whole different skill set. So I spent pretty much 4 years under Cole, 4 or 5 years, 24/7 pretty much. And it literally took me 4 years to just learn just the basics of surfboard design. That was just the basics of surfboard design. So, but because I knew the basics of surfboard design, when I went from the hand shaping to computer shaping, I knew the why behind like concaves, rails, foil, all these. There's so many dimensions of the surfboard, but because I knew how to hand shape and design a board, when I went to the computer, like I didn't hit and miss. I knew what I was doing, so that was a big benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So you had the experience. So do you feel like your sort of skill or trade is a lot different to what it is now? And do people want to get into your sort of trade, or is it more because it's just easier doing it by, say, computer? Like, is there still people out there that want, hand-shaped boards?
Yeah, for sure. There is definitely a market. That market isn't in the high-performance shortboard, because the benefits of using a computer and a CAD machine is like you can fine tune down to the to the 64th of an inch. Like if you want to, it is so fine tuned. And not just that, you can replicate it board after board after board, where with hand shaping it was very much like an art. And you kind of go, you certainly have your measurements that, because back when I started and we were doing lost surfboards, we were production shaping for another company in America. So we had the outlines of the boards that the shaper over there, Matt Biolis, wanted, but because he knew Cole really well and respected Cole's hand shaping, sort of allowed Cole to be able to do the rockers for and the not the outlines, the rockers and the rest of the board design. He left it up to Cole to do. So as long as the outline looked like a lost board, he trusted Cole to just make the surfboard work for each place. Like if it was up on the Gold Coast, we would do certain things to boards. If it was in Victoria, Bells, if it was on the northern beaches, we would be able to add elements into the design for certain spots. But these days with the computer, it is good. So if we were doing that now with Lost, or say for instance, like with Misfit, when we send boards over to, to Europe or to America, like I can design the file from home and then email it to the guys in Europe or into America, and they get the exact file that you can get anywhere around the world. So it's very uniform. Like everyone kind of gets that shape, which is good. Yeah. But it just doesn't have, like, I suppose the what do you call it? Like the area, knowing that living on the northern beaches, we knew that these rockers, these rails, these concaves went good for around here.
Okay.
Then up in Queensland, we knew that, we'd do certain things to the rockers.
Yeah, so. Okay. Where if you're saying if it's just overseas and it's just a file, it's more like a template and it's just every board's the same.
It's an all, like, it'll work. Like you definitely know it'll work, but it's just a master file that that someone will jump on it and it'll work really well. And then if people who are very good surfers, they might want to fine tune it, so you can work with them in playing with rockers or fin placings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But getting back to your question about hand shaping, there are still quite a few hand shapers out there.
Yep.
And that's more in the maybe like the longboard, retro twin fin sort of that sort of category. And there are certainly people out there that surfers shape. Sorry, there are certainly shapers out there that surfers want them to hand shape boards for, and those guys are they're artisans. They're amazing.
So do you see that, as you were saying? Do you feel like it's more of an art and a skill? So do you feel like this art can be passed down and will be passed down? I'm thinking from such a hand-on, genuine, care perspective versus technology. Like in, say, 5-10 years' time, if someone wants to get into this industry to be a surfboard shaper, do you think that craft and that art will still be there?
No, I don't.
No?
I don't. Well, yes, sorry. It will still be there, but it'll be extremely niche. And as hand shaping is becoming more and more of a dying art, it's in 5 or 10 years, like I think there'll be 3D what is it
3D
printing.
Yep.
Like I think materials will probably change, but I think 3D printing will come into surfboard somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was probably the last generation of production shapers.
Okay.
So back in the 2000s, because at that time, like I said, there weren't many CAD machines around.
Yep.
So like, all the major labels were all hand shaped, and previous to that. So I would have been pretty much one of the last production shapers that learnt the skill from start to finish. I can't see the kids these days, doing 4 years of 24/7 learning surfboard design and hand shaping, because it is such a there's so many elements that you need to know to design boards from scratch. But I can see them learning programs that will help them with shape. 3D printing. I think that would be, something that they might look at. I think it's still a while off before they do that, but I think it would help being more computer illiterate these days.
Yeah, and is that including like being a graphic designer of some sort? Like what that whole designing component? I assume you need to be good at designing in general.
Yeah, I think if you want a brand, like yes, in surfboard design, you need to know surfboard design. You do need to know it because you can be great at printing, 3D printing, but you got to put the elements into a surfboard. So I probably see the kids probably taking boards from shapers that they know that go well, and they'll probably scan them, and then they'll go from there. And that's kind of what happened back in the day when when the CAD machines came in. People were ripping everyone or the labels designs off, and then basically putting their own decals over it. So I reckon that will probably start again, because if you don't know surfboard design, you've got to get it from somewhere. So there'll be a little bit of ripping off there. So yeah, I do think with design, I think if you're looking to have a brand, that's a whole different world in itself. Like Misfit is a brand. It's not just a surfboard shaping company.
Yeah,
I was very, very blessed to have known my business partner Chongi for about 20 years now. So he's without him, Misfit would not be where it is today, because I'm very good with my hands and designing surfboards I know inside out. But yeah, when it comes to actually brand, that's where Chongi is just amazing at that, and he's the one that sort of built the brand around the surfboard. So
yeah, right. Okay, we might come back to the brand. I just wanted to finish touching on, you said the design element, learn 3D printing and maybe graphic designs or whatever. But I assume, and I'm not a surfer, right? So that's why I'm asking the question. But I assume you got to know the water as a surfboard shaper, right? You got to know how the board works, how the water comes off it and so forth. So I assume you still got to know that stuff to be a surfboard shaper.
Yeah, so learning the basics of hydrodynamics, like it can help. Like I didn't do any courses in it, but just knowing how water flows over a single concave to a double concave to a V to a flatter deck or a more domed deck, and then putting all those elements together. So that is something that it's just experience over years of designing surfboards, watching your team riders surf them, and not just team riders, anyone really, because it's just watching how the water runs off a rail and where it sort of holds, where the hard edge at the tail, and it's just that, again, there's just so many elements there. So yeah, learning how water flows over a board, under a board is very important.
Yeah. So you got to get your hours up with surfing, right?
Yes, R&D.
That's where you get all the hours up first before you become one, I guess. Because that was my next question. What's a typical day look like for you? And I think everyone visualize people that work in the surf industry, they just surf all day. I assume that's not the case. As a shaper, you have to deal with different people to get the board from design to actually production, I assume?
Yeah. So, yes, that is one of the biggest myths in surfboard manufacturing, that you just surf all day, especially...
Well, you got to test the boards out, right?
That's it. That's what I tell my wife. But yeah, like just being a shaper, like people think you got 100 boards in your quiver and you surf all day. Yeah, generally not surfing as much as you'd like. You probably watch more surfing than you are surfing, and I've got less than a handful of boards in my shed. So, and that's including a couple of softies that I muck around with my kids on. So yeah, it is a massive process, and working with the really good tradesmen in their craft, like from people that put fins in the boards to glassing the board to fillering the boards to sanding the boards. It's just such a big process, and if you get one of those wrong, like it can make, I can shape the best surfboard in the world, but if the fin's put in not correctly or not evenly, like they're not both the same, it can kill a board. So where I work at the Glass Lab, I'm very blessed to be working in basically the best manufacturing place in the world, I reckon, for high performance shortboards.
Yeah, right.
They're just their attention to detail is like no other. And I've been to a lot of manufacturers around the world, and there's some amazing ones out there. But yeah, these guys are the best I from what I've seen, and it's an honor to be working in that factory because, from the groms that put the fins in the boards to the guys that, there's glasses in there that are in their 60s that have been doing it for 40 plus years, to sanders, and they are the best out there, I reckon.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so typical day, you might start with designing a board, or do you have meetings? I assume you have meetings with the glasses and so forth.
Yeah, generally when I go to a factory and I'm just sort of starting there, I will work very closely with the guys who manufacture the board. So I'll work on, how I want the fins sort of splayed out, what degrees I'd like, my thrusters to 20s. I'll work really closely with sanders because I just the blend from the hard edge in the tail to the soft edge is something that I'm very particular about, and I just want it to feel like it's my like how I've shaped it. I want it to feel like that when it's finished. So when I turn a board and put the board on its nose, and I just feel the hard edge of the board and that roll into that soft edge, I just want it to feel like I feel when I'm in my shaping bay. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. My next question is, what are the most rewarding aspects of being a surfboard shaper?
It's pretty simple to me. I just like putting smiles on people's faces.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're, going for a world title, and I haven't shaped for someone going for a world title, but
not
I'd
yet.
like to one
not
day.
yet. Yeah.
But there's a lot of pressure in that, top echelon of surfing. Like that is a hell of a lot of pressure for the shapers. But to the grom that's getting their first custom board, to the weekend warrior, I just, if you're not smiling when you're surfing, then there's no use doing it. So I just like putting smiles on people's faces. So that's why I love doing it.
Yeah, great. And do you feel like there's a lot of competition, or there's plenty of space for everyone to be a surfboard shaper, or even build your own brand, which I want to really touch on next?
Yeah, the space is getting a lot smaller these days because, again, going from when I was just hand shaping to be able to be very good at that, you had to spend a lot of time and a lot of hours, doing that. You're very consumed, and you couldn't just knock out a board and hope to look good. You had to know what you're doing. Where these days with computers, it's so much easier to design a board and it just go. It's very easy. I mean, when you talk from that sort of scale to the best in the world, that's chalk and cheese. So yeah, the competition in the shortboard world, or even in just shaping in general, has narrowed a lot because people can use the computer and they get someone that's very good with graphics, or they may be very good at graphics, and they will be able to design a nice logo and slap it on a board and, get a nice website.
Yeah.
And, they're probably good at social media. So there's a lot of amazing shapers out there, and even some of the old school shapers that, I'd get a board hands down in a second if I could, instead of going to some of these, like newer sort of younger shapers.
Yeah.
that have the best looking logo on their boards, because it comes down to experience. And the guy that taught me to shape, Cole Adams, like his and that sort of era of shapers, like they know they are master craftsmen. They know a surfboard inside out, back to front.
Yeah,
they're just amazing. So to get a board off one of those guys,
yep,
to getting a board off someone that's shaped for 3 to 5, 7 years, that's never picked up a planer, has a really nice logo and has some nice sprays.
Yeah,
it's chalk and cheese there.
Yeah, gotcha.
But the consumer is so enamored by social media these days that they love the sprays, the logos, and they just get caught up in that world, and and that's fine too. So there's new markets for that.
Yeah.
But I think the market is getting narrower and narrower these days.
Yeah, great. And talking about your market, I want to touch base on Misfit, your surf brand, and how did it go? How did it start? Like, obviously, you were surfboard shaping with Cole for all the different, I guess, brands.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it go from that to, hey, I want to start my own surfboard brand, Misfit, which is pretty big these days?
Yeah.
So tell us a background on that.
With that, I was hand shaping like the Lost, and I also was hand shaping another brand called Weber at the time. And after the 4 years of really just doing my basic apprenticeship, some friends would ask me if like I could do some boards. So at that point, I would just sort of blend with what Cole had taught me. And, again, I was very lucky to have gone over to America and stay with Matt Byles, who is the head loss shaper over there and founder, and stay with him and watch how they shape boards. But so putting everything that I'd learnt together, that's where Misfit came from. So it was like, instead of having to do like rockers like this for this model for that company, and then the same for the other company, I sort of was starting to get my own ideas on how I would like to do some boards. So that's where Misfit came into being. And I didn't have any fancy logos when I first started Misfit. I just drew Misfit on a A4 piece of paper, and then got a razor blade and cut that out.
Yeah, right.
And then I would just stencil it onto the board.
Okay.
So, and I still got that stencil, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of how Misfit started. It was just.
And the name? Where did the name come from?
The name? That's a good question. That was because I was very much a misfit in the world. I used to party quite a bit and go pretty crazy. So Misfit was a good name for my brand, I thought.
Yep.
And but when I started going out on my own in around 2004, I had a pretty radical transformation. I actually became a Christian. I was kind of at the lowest point of my life. So I found Jesus, which was a lifesaver for me, and still is. And I was a bit worried at that point because I was like, I'm the name Misfit. I'm sure I'm going to have to get rid of that because my thoughts of what a misfit was what I was.
Yeah.
But I was basically taken on a journey, and I ended up at the library and opened up a thesaurus.
Right.
And I felt like God was guiding me to this thesaurus, and I opened it up, and I went and had a look what a misfit was, and it said misfit, a noun, someone ill adapt to their surroundings.
Right.
So as soon as I read it, I just felt like, what I've been reading in the Bible, that, Jesus was a misfit.
Yep.
He was in this world, but he wasn't of this world. And as Christians, we are to be in this world, but not of it. So that was where the name really stood out for me, where I thought that I was going to have to get a new name. And I love the name, and but I was just shown that, you don't have to be, like I was, that you can still be, you can still be you, but, God just sort of, really changed my life around, and, the adventure that I was seeking in other things I found elsewhere. So when that happened, I was pretty stoked about that I could keep the name Misfit. And then the night I became a Christian, I met my business partner, Chris Chongi. So I went to a Christian surfers event on a Monday night, and we picked him up on the way there, and I didn't want to go because I wasn't in a good state then. I had a big weekend and it wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. But
Sure.
My mate Joel picked me up and basically dragged me there, and that's where I met my business partner for the first time.
Yeah, right. And you are today.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk through, just briefly or however long, your journey with Chris on, the ups and downs of where Misfit started and where it is now. I'm sure there's still up and downs, but obviously you guys have really built this brand. People are wearing the Misfit clothes, using the surfboard. Give us a bit of an insight on that journey.
So, like I said, I met Chris in 2004, May 2004, and he was working in the surf apparel industry. So he was working in some surf shops. So he was selling surfboards in Manly at the time. So we become friends, and it wasn't until about 2008, 2009, that's where we something clicked and kind of felt like we were to kind of work together. So around that time, Chris started helping me with the branding of Misfit. So previous to that, it was just a surfboard brand, but turning it into a brand as such, where marketing it as a brand, not just a surfboard. That's where he come from. He come from background, not just work. He worked his way up from selling surfboards to managing surfboard stores, and then started working in the apparel industry with Quicksilver, and then then started working for Insight around the time where we started sort of thinking about, we'll potentially, we will come together at some point. We didn't know when.
Yeah.
But, Chongi was working in that area, honing his skills, and he is extremely good at that. He's the best out there.
Yeah.
And I was, I really backed myself with shaping at that point. Like I'd been, shaping for, 9 years, and had, done well and surely done my trade, and started to really understand, surfboard design. So coming together. And then it happened in 2010, Chongi and myself opened up the Sugar Mill in Narrabeen, which was a surf store. So it was, we had brands that were kind of aligned with Misfit. So, at that point, having Insight that was very countercultural. I always loved Vans. Vans was my first brand that and still to this day wear. I've been wearing it pretty much all my life. And it's just such amazing brand. I probably skated a little bit before I surfed when I was a kid, and I really loved Tony Alva, and what he did with his brand Alva. So Misfit for me was again, like, it was that blending of the surfboard manufacturers that I used to shape for, Lost, and but also as a branding, I really liked Alva and how he marketed it, and that again, that countercultural punk sort of feel. So, and Chongi coming from Insight, that sort of had that feel as well, but probably a bit more a lot more like polished. So we sort of, Misfit as a brand sort of became a blend of myself and Chongi. So that's kind of where it started. And then, we were printing T-shirts, like Misfit T-shirts. So we would have some of our team riders. We have team riders that are a little bit different. They're not, generally on the WCT or the QS or anything like that. They're very good surfers. They like maybe good musicians or artists, and they just surf the way they feel. It wouldn't, generally be scored that well in a contest, but they're very very authentic in the way they surf. They feel it, and I just love that kind of surfing. It's very raw.
Yeah.
And we had a surfer that used to ride for us, Otis Carey, and I used to love just the way he surfed. Again, he just really, fitted where we were at the time, and like we were raw and as a brand, and he was raw, and again, really helped boost the profile of Misfit surfboards.
Yep.
And Misfit out there, and having the brands and people wearing like T-shirts. So we would make these T-shirts that some of these artists would do for us. So it had Misfit on it, but they would do their art, and we would sell it in our store at the Sugar Mill, and they would sell through really quick. And so as we were sort of, as the years were progressing, we kind of got, more and more into the apparel side. And in about 2015, we were approached by a company to license Misfit, and to be able to, they would manufacture and sell our clothing.
Yeah.
So that was just an absolute blessing, because we're very good at what we do with branding and art direction, but the company we partnered up with were very, very good at manufacturing. They had a lot of doorways and logistics and everything like that. So it was a perfect partnership, and it still runs to this day. So that's been a real journey, and just seeing where the journey has taken us in, from we signed that agreement back in 2016. So where are we? We're 7 years into it, and it's been amazing to see the brand come as far as it has, where it is now, from the humble beginnings in Brookvale as me, stenciling my Misfit on a surfboard, to now being in, multiple countries around the world. And, you see people from, all walks of life in all different countries. It's extremely humbling, and it's, I give God all the glory for that, because I'm certainly not that smart when I couldn't do that. And, by myself. So having amazing people beside me, like Jongy, to bring his gifts together and to make it as it is today. It's and also all the team riders, past, present, and future. It makes Misfit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just listening to you talk about that journey, I think the key elements that I hear is that whole partnership. You mentioned it a few times. It's about getting the right partners. I like that, Chris was in that whole retail appeal sort of merchandise perspective, and you just kept your, skill on shaping, and then you came together later on when you really mastered your skill, if you want to say, and then you got the right people. So how did you, through that experience, how did you know that this was the right partnership to move into or go with to continue to build Misfit?
With Chris?
Oh, Chris, or anyone that, came along with the journey.
Yeah, I think just mainly like for like. We generally get people, we don't normally reach out as such. It's people will DM us or send some, it used to be DVDs back in the day, but it's basically all social media these days. So we've been, we've had amazing contacts, like what the lead guitarist out of Foo Fighters, Chris Shiflett.
Yeah, right.
He loved what we do, and we've done him a handful of boards. So when he comes over to Australia, he always grabs a board, and
That's
in
cool.
return, he gives us these backstage passes to
Yeah,
go see
right.
the Foo Fighters, which is just, that's just mind blowing. And
Yeah, of
it's,
course.
again, it's very humbling to be able to be, in the presence of, those guys. It's amazing. To garage bands, to, we've had, some of our team riders that have had bands, like there's Jake Vincent and his sister Jaleesa. They've had a couple bands together, and again, just raw. It's just Misfit.
Yep.
It's it's kind of like for like. A few years ago we had music. We did a music festival, and we just picked some of the bands, like old school bands, new school bands, that were just very Misfit, what we and it sold out, and that was in the city of Sydney. We were in this pub there, and that was amazing just to see that. And we're very lucky to have such diverse people, and people who are just good at what they do, whether they are artists or they're musicians, they're surfers.
Yeah.
They're just creative, and it just if it sort of we do get a lot of people wanting us to do certain things, but it's basically just kind of got to align with with the brand.
Yeah, the brand, and I guess the values, right, is probably what the key is. It sounds like all the people that you've agreed to work with have similar values or similar vision, where they're all very supportive and just want to genuinely do well for each other and so forth.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cool. So, probably wrapping up, we've spent a good hour already together, and I feel like we could talk forever. But I guess for you, with all your experience, what's your advice to people that want to be a surfboard shaper, or, just want to be successful in general? Is there a couple of things that you sort of, the values that we were talking about, is there anything that you really stick to that you might want to share?
Yeah, I think you've got to do what you love doing. Like, don't do it just for the money. Like you certainly need money. Like, I'm not saying you don't need that. You certainly do. But love what you do. I couldn't think of anything worse, waking up every day and just hating, going to work. Life is so short, and there's so much out there. So to wake up every morning and not love what you do, I think, you're kind of wasting, life a bit. But again, people are in certain seasons of life. So, there's times at the very beginning of when I went out on my own with surfboard shaping, like I was carpet laying, helping a mate do that to make ends meet. And, I didn't love doing that, but you got to do what you got to do to earn a buck and put food on the table and roof over your head. So but ultimately you kind of would like to be able to do what you love to do. And again, doesn't have to be in the art world or music, or whether you're a lawyer, a banker, or whatever. Like, I just think enjoying what you do is just such is number one. I think having also good people around you too. I think that's a big one. Having good people around you, and people that, like, I was very blessed to have Chongi, come into my life, and us, we had this friendship before we started started the brand as such. And then I think, and having people around you that support you too. I've been very blessed to have amazing people around me, from family to friends to help me, because it is a hard journey, owning, your own business, especially in this day and age, and in this post-COVID world. Like, the world has really changed. It's changed so much in the last 3 to 4 years, and just having to reinvent yourself all the time. You can't, what we did, 12 months ago doesn't necessarily work now, and especially what we did 3 years ago before the pandemic, that is, you can't do that. So you always got to be, on the forefront of what you do, whether it's, design or whatever you do, being at the forefront. And, for me and for my business partner, Chongi, having God on your side certainly helps as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great. Okay, well, David, thank you for your time. And I'm sure the listeners will appreciate your time as well and get some great insight on life being a surfboard shaper.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
All good. Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that first episode. It was great chatting with David from Misfit, and a few things that really stood out to me. The first was that the art of hand shaping surfboards may not be around forever, especially with the rapid advancements in technology. However, there's still a demand from surfers who really appreciate that uniqueness of a handmade board. So there's potential for those aspiring to be surfboard shapers. Speaking of technology, it's clear that surfboard production is becoming more efficient. So if you are looking to pursue a career in surfboard shaping, it's beneficial to develop both your IT and designing skills. The last takeaway for me is that whether you're starting a surfboard business or any other venture, it's essential to refine your craft and form partnerships with individuals who complement your skills or bring different expertise to the table. Doing this will enhance your chances of success. So thanks for tuning in, and make today a good news day.